Welcome to Data Hurdles, a weekly podcast where we explore the impacts data and technology have on our day-to-day lives. My name is Michael Burke.
And I'm Chris Detzel.
All right, welcome to another Data Hurdles. I'm Chris Detzel and
I'm Michael Burke. And today we have Kristof back again from DataBlend. How are you, Kristof?
Hey, good, Mike. Thanks for having me back on.
yeah, another data company.
And I hear we're talking about an exciting and recent event at a company outside of DataBlend. Kick it off, Kristof. Let's hear more about what we're diving into today.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys saw in the news, but there's a pretty big breach recently at this company, 3CX, which I actually wasn't familiar with until this broke about a week ago. But they're a VoIP company, so they provide VoIP software, not unlike Zoom or Teams. But I guess their special sauce was a virtual PBX, so playing nice with kind of legacy phone systems. But anyways, this breach was pretty interesting. It looks like it was a supply chain attack from some North Korean hackers who actually were able to exploit one of 3CX's Git repos, put some malware into one of their updates, and then actually have those updates get downloaded by their customers and deployed to their customers' clients. It was really interesting. The way they did it, the malware actually didn't cause any issues as far as the VoIP system operating, so it still is operating normally. But it actually started to get caught by some of the EDR providers like SentinelOne, Sophos, and CrowdStrike, and they're actually showing up as malware alerts, which is pretty nutty. And then the customers started to report that to 3CX, and 3CX just did a terrible job of responding to it. It seemed that they thought that it was a false positive. They didn't really take it seriously. They told customers to talk to their endpoint providers. And it took them about a week before they admitted there was actually an issue. So it's pretty crazy.
And Kristof, before we go into the issue and the remediation and your opinions on that, so just so everybody understands, this breach was done by a group from the government of North Korea, the Lazarus group, right? And they are like, this is an entire government that's taking credit for this breach. So why are governments attacking private companies? What's going on here, and why is this happening? And even more so, why are they named groups, right?
Oh, dude, the name groups is all about getting your hacker cred, right? Eventually this is going to be attributed to someone, and if you're a Lazarus, you want to get your cred out there. But as far as the targets, it really ties back to data, which makes targets valuable. So in this case, they're still looking into it, but my understanding is these phone systems, one thing I saw was they're used by a bunch of cryptocurrency firms. So there may have been a play there to actually take over some of those crypto wallets that might be managed by those cryptocurrency firms. And then another thing I saw when I was reading about it, where there was a lot of managed service providers. So if you're a managed service provider and you're deploying the 3CX phone client on all of your customers' environments, you could potentially have exponentially more data that you could compromise and exfiltrate from all those different customers versus just targeting one company. It's pretty interesting.
And so these government groups are trying to get data out of a PBX system and a VoIP system what do you like? I know you mentioned the cryptocurrency part, but are they actually trying to steal or listen in on the calls that are happening? Like, is it more about
Yeah,
obtaining
no,
the?
that's a really good question. My understanding is they're actually using those as a pivoting point. So they're using the phone system with the malware. So install the malware on the phone system client that's installed on your PC. Use that to then exploit it and get a foothold into your environment, and then actually pivot over and target other systems. So it wasn't
Oh
really like
gosh,
phone data that's of value. But any other data that you might have at your company,
wow.
once you've pivoted over using that exploit, you could, in this case, potentially take over, someone's laptop or workstation, and then based on the access that that person has, then go and exploit other areas.
That's pretty crazy that because it goes into their customers' data and steals, or they potentially could steal all that. I mean, that's pretty insane.
Yeah, and using, like a managed service provider as like your malware distributor in this
Mm.
case. I mean, it's happened before. It's actually one of those popular strategies, right? If I compromise one person who's then going to send this over to 100 different clients,
Mhm.
install it on all of their machines for you,
Oh my God.
it gets your kind of target base that much bigger.
This is what just scares me about software in general right now, right? You hire a product, you bring it into your environment, and I'm reading on 3CX website, 12 million plus active users, right? 12 million people across multiple, probably all enterprise companies or mostly enterprise, right? Now, this government has an entryway into your network where they can then deploy a number of attacks that you as a small business or medium-sized business probably aren't prepared or equipped to handle. And they've just taken over, a huge amount of enterprises across a space where you hired this product, for phone, probably not thinking about it as something that is you need to like really vet or be concerned about when you brought it into your environment. And now your whole environment might be compromised, right? And then Kristof, tell us a little bit more about what 3CX did, right? And what is the right way to respond to an incident like this? You hit the oh shit button, right? You start
Exactly.
realizing that this terrible thing has happened. How should you respond? And then how did 3CX respond?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly not easy. I mean, I have the luxury of this not being my company, and thankfully us not using 3CX. But in this case, there's a lot of articles out there. The one I was reading actually pointed over to some forums, the 3CX like customer engagement forum, where actually customers were going in. This was, a week and a half ago, so say like March 23rd. Um, and asking 3CX support, hey, my Sentinel-1 is putting out alerts that your product is sending out command and control signals. Um, what's going on here? And 3CX basically did about as bad as you could.
Shut down the
Either
forums.
either ghosting them, not I guess that could be worse.
Yeah.
But ghosting them or telling them that they need to reach out to Sentinel-1, this might be a false positive.
Mm.
Um, basically staying silent. And then even after CrowdStrike attributed it to North Korea, um, it was still another day before they went out and their CEO posted an alert. Um,
And Kristof, really,
ideally,
really quickly for everybody on the call, what is Sentinel-1 and what is CrowdStrike? What do they do?
yeah. Sentinel-1 and CrowdStrike, they're managed endpoint detection and response providers. So you can think of it as like a souped up antivirus. Um, but essentially, they're monitoring data that's being sent typically from an agent that they have installed on their machines.
Yep.
So they're monitoring that traffic, monitoring activity, and looking to help folks respond So detect, anomalous activity and then respond based on that. So in this case, they had detected something funky or wrong with the client that had been installed, the 3CX client, and were alerting their customers about it a week before 3CX did anything about it, which is kind of disheartening.
That's super scary. And so that means that, probably a couple weeks, this organized crime group in North Korea had to attack devices on anybody who had installed this latest update on their networked computers. And what Sentinel-1 did was it managed to saying, hey, some users in your organization, their computers are doing something funky, attacking other computers or whatever, and they're trying to send alerts, which then your CISO or whatnot is then reaching out to this product saying, hey, what is happening with your product? And a week goes by and nothing is done. What could a company like 3CX be thinking? Why would they not take immediate action?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. It's hard to know like what their internal security maturity was like. So, maybe they hadn't gone through test scenarios. So one thing, it's a good security practice is to go through and do tabletop exercises. So maybe go through um, and test your communication processes. So, say we have a supply chain attack. Okay, what is our chain of command as far as communicating this out to our customers? They may have been doing that internally and just didn't have a good process to then take that to the next
Which is
level.
it's a bad communication plan, right? So
Yeah.
whoever was, so they could have done things differently security wise for sure, but the way they handled it was bad PR, bad whoever the communications officer was or isn't or whatever. They didn't handle that well at all. To say, hey, it's happened to me at another company that I was at, and I remember when we first found out, we immediately like there was this huge group that got together internally that met over the weekend, just trying to figure out what is our plan, what are we trying to do, and they immediately went after it. It didn't
Yep.
save the CEO's job at the time, but it was the right thing to do as immediate as you can. And then, you've got to communicate that one in a press release. You got to communicate that in a, email to your customers and what are you doing about it? How are you going to keep them updated? And all of these things that they obviously didn't do. They just kind of like ignored it for a week or two,
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly, Chris. I mean, oftentimes these in cyber, or really any area, communication's paramount. And it's oftentimes like the kind of basics that hold people up, and it's not, something super sexy, a piece of technology or something that leads to the biggest issues. This one's still unfolding, so we'll see, when it comes to actual attributing data breaches to it. It's still too new, I think, to know that. But the damage has been done, even if no data was leaked. The damage for 3CX, I mean, I should have mentioned, I actually first found out about this from a customer of ours who was querying all of their vendors to see if any of them used 3CX to kind of assess what the risk might be to them, which actually I was pretty impressed by. I mean, they did that.
That is impressive. Yeah.
Within a day, which actually is kind of the fastest downstream vendor response I've seen yet. So, that part was actually pretty cool and clued me in to look at it closer.
so quick question. Do you mind on this particular question? So many people or so many companies you hear of data, being breached, and it's just become kind of normal. Like it's you hear it, and it's not really like, who cares?
Yeah.
I'll give you an example. Like Garmin, for example, had this huge data breach. And you can imagine. I mean, it has all of our my information on there, has phone numbers, all kinds of different things just for Garmin. And it was a big deal they were down for a week or something like that, or a couple days. I don't remember. These people have all my data, I'm sure, and other people's data, but it carries on and like nothing really happened to them that I know of. And I still use Garmin. You know what I mean? Like, so maybe that's just because we're a different type of consumer than a B2B type of company. I don't know. What is the um repercussions of that from a company standpoint, but also from a customer standpoint? Like my data or a company's data is now out there, not just, does that make sense? Like, what are the
Yeah,
repercussions
yeah.
of that?
It's definitely true. People are becoming numb. I've even
Yeah.
experienced that. I mean,
Yep.
I'm going to date myself a little bit, but like TJX back in like it was 10 or 15 years ago,
Yeah.
huge credit card breach. Um, and for years, I wouldn't shop at any, TJ Maxx or TJX
Security guy.
places. I was like, no, I'm not doing that. But do I still, keep that up? No. Time can kind of heal wounds, if you will, as far as your reputation. I think B2B is definitely a different beast
Yeah.
than consumers. Consumers are definitely way more forgiving than enterprise. Um, so, if you do any sort of B2B or enterprise business, protecting reputation vis-a-vis data leaks is huge. Um, Big players definitely can recover from it. Time will tell what the impact will be for someone like 3CX. I imagine it's going to be pretty significant since there are alternatives.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, I mean, it is one of those interesting things that I wonder if it will change over time. If at some point we will become less numb as these breaches get bigger and more
Yeah.
impactful, or if we'll continue down that numbing path. Um,
Yeah. The thing that scares me though is just like they had an opportunity, like 3CX, to get into your system, right? And so you have no idea. You get rid of 3CX, you say, there, I've solved the problem. I'm never going to use them as again. You have no idea how many other infections are now deployed across your infrastructure with other devices, right? Because that's the whole point, is that they have this opportunity, and especially for people who don't have the Sentinel ones or other security technology managing their endpoints, they could be deploying all sorts of other stuff into your environment, right? And so it's not like they're gone once you've removed that software.
for
Um,
sure, for sure. And even in this case of Sentinel-1, I haven't read all the details, but it did look like that they had been at least for a couple of weeks active in those environments. And I think what might have triggered the detection is um, they had set a timer for the malware to actually start to actively communicate back to their command and control servers. So say you deploy malware and you say, okay, in 1 week, I
yeah.
want you to then kind of activate and start communicating back. And that's when, the malware detection might pick it up. So these threat actors are getting so sophisticated where they'll do stuff like that and wait
Let it
until
live dormant in your system. Yeah.
yeah,
Oh,
wait until they have a big foothold. Um, it's like an ambush, right? And you rather than attacking the enemy as soon as they're right there, you let them all get right in front of you.
Kind of like
Um,
a tumor in the head, man. It just kind of grows, these little technical things, just grabs a hole and all of a sudden, oh, that's a bad one, but
so so you know, going back to like a average user or even a small business, right? Because ultimately, if anybody on the call is listening and does have 3CX software, hopefully they've patched by now and gotten off the system or taken some sort of action to protect themselves, right? But what else can customers do, right? In a circumstance like this, if you are one of these customers, what kind of steps should you be taking now? Like if Kristof, if your company was under a breach like this, what would you have to do as an organization to at
yeah,
least ensure some degree of security, right?
yeah, it's a good question. Obviously, like 100% security is not realistic, right? Like if North Korea decides to target you, you're in a tough spot. But
Yeah.
there is a lot you can do. Um, and one of the easiest things is to actually think critically about who you do business with and what vendors you use. Ask them some questions about, what their security program and protocols are like. Do some due diligence. Obviously, they still, could be attacked. But get a sense for does this vendor or do these partners take security seriously? Have they taken precautions? And do you have confidence that, if they were attacked, that they would actually communicate and have those open channels of communication? Because even if they've got great protections, as we alluded to before, if they don't have those communication channels, your response could be undermined by something as trivial as that.
Got it. Yeah. And when you experience a breach like this, right? If you were part of this and let's say there is something in your system, what do you have to do as an end user when when something like this affects you, right? Are there softwares? Are there like technologies? Do you just say like burn everything and start from scratch, right?
Even then, you got to log into the system or whatever, different systems, right?
Yeah.
It's there.
Yeah. Well, hopefully you've got a security partner, like we mentioned, CrowdStrike, SentinelOne, those type, and if you subscribe to their endpoint detection and response, they'll have like breach support services. Cyber insurance is another good path, where if you do have a breach, they'll connect you with like a breach coach. There's actually professionals out there who
Very cool.
really all they do is help to
See, there's a ton
guide
of them. Ton of
guide
breaches out
people
there.
through. Yeah, there's a lot of breaches, so there's a lot of breach coaches. But they can help guide you through a scenario like this. And then obviously, working with the vendor. So like in this case, 3CX, their guidance was to start using their web client. So they have a web application
Yep.
that uses completely different infrastructure, so it wasn't compromised. So in that case, you could pivot all your users immediately over to that and maintain some continuity, right? Because depending on your business, if you don't have phones,
Phone. Yeah.
you could be in a spot, right? If your business is a call center or something like that. So I think that's really key, is to think about business continuity as well in tandem with your recovery of, mitigating the actual compromise. So there's a lot that goes into it. It's a whole discipline of incident response and breach management and recovery. Definitely a challenging discipline.
Yeah, absolutely. It is so wild to me. And, I just want to say it's pretty amazing that your vendor heard about this, not to talk too much about your work, but then reached out to you as a vendor of theirs and checked if you had this software, right? That's some pretty impressive due diligence on that customer's behalf, right?
Yeah, well, yeah, yeah. And that ties back to your question, right? So like having good communication with your vendors. Luckily, we have those channels. Like they reached out to me on Friday and we were able to chat about it. But at first I was like, what the heck are these guys asking about? I had never heard of 3CX. So yeah, I was pretty impressed by the maturity of their vendor management and vendor risk program, which is another, huge way to get in front of some of these risks. Analyze your vendors, review, do some of the boring stuff, review their SOC 2 reports, their ISO 27001 certificates,
Yep.
all that
Important,
stuff.
I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, it does matter. And that's not to say that folks couldn't be, breached even if they have that stuff. But it gives you a certain level of confidence that you might not otherwise have.
the thing that's crazy for me is I just feel like, I'm a technical person. I work in the space. I'm completely overwhelmed by all of this, right?
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
of like, I'm starting to like look around my home and I'm like, man, have I updated and patched my router? Like, what are all these things that I'm sure you have to think about as a professional on a daily basis. If big organizations are running into these problems, are we just completely screwed as individuals? Like, is there any hope for us, for those that don't have an endpoint protection or malware service? Like, what are we up against? And then furthermore, the thing that keeps running through my mind is we're in this work from home world now.
Yeah.
How the heck do we, I understand that some of the stuff that we put on our devices to better monitor this stuff, but at like the network in the perimeter of the employee, how do you even think about that?
Yeah. I think a lot of the same principles that you apply in your work life can apply in your personal life. It's just a different scale, right? So, if we're talking about, a small or medium business, say maybe it's like 1,000 employees, right? They're going to be limited in how much they can respond to North Korea attacking them. The same applies to you as an individual, but there's still a lot you can do, right? So, if you're running an old Windows XP computer that you've got in your closet, maybe it's time to, toss that thing in the dump and get something new. So basic like security hygiene is huge. Just, set auto updates on your machine. Use multi-factor authentication on all of your accounts. Use a password manager, stuff
Yes.
like that. Can go a long way towards mitigating a lot of the risk. And then also, don't reuse your passwords, obviously. So like any threat actor, at the end of the day, they want to get something of value. So, if they compromise your personal machine, what they're going to get of value is what you're actually using that machine for. So, maybe getting into your bank account or pivoting access to your work computer. So definitely, don't reuse credentials across systems, because that's one of the easiest ways they could do that. If your Windows password's the same as your Hotmail password, not a great idea.
So you're telling me that my family friend who doesn't trust online banking is probably safer than me?
It depends.
Only writes checks and gets paper statements.
Getting their money is harder. It's
I
not
thought you were going to
convenient.
say, all their money's under their mattress. Then I'd say probably not.
No. Chris, any more questions on your end? I think this is super interesting. Like we have so much to learn from you, Kristof, in this space. These updates on recent events are they're insightful, but also terrifying. I feel like a little unsafe right now.
Yeah.
I do too. And it's like you mentioned that you could be as safe and secure as a company, let's say, could be super safe, taking all the precautions. So maybe 3CX did. And maybe they didn't do anything that you wouldn't have done. Maybe they're doing everything that you're doing at your company or our company. But if they want to go after you, they're gonna break into it, right? And so that's what they did with this company. And what you're telling me is, if they go after you, you're probably screwed.
Yeah,
this is
you
gonna
probably
happen. So what it tells. Go ahead.
But
sorry.
but the one thing I would say is, you need to limit the value of the same kind of principle, right? So if they come after you, you want to limit what they have of value. So, don't have, all of your customer data in a unencrypted database that everyone has access to, right? So that, when someone gets in the door, they then, get the gold mine, if you will.
Let them jump through hoops to go get it.
Yeah, make it harder. That's essentially really all you can do, is at every, step of the game, make it harder for them. And then, either you'll find them and get them out of your systems, or they'll give up and go find an easier target.
Yeah, I like that. That's great advice to really
I think conclude. I mean, Kristof, this is really good. Thank you so much for coming. Michael, Burke, thanks again, as usual. I'm Chris Detzel, and
I'm Michael Burke. And it's another Data Hurdles. Have a great day, guys. Happy Friday.
thanks, everyone.